From the way Merv used it in his letter, it looked as if the societies people had found measurable applications in societies and groups, at least on other planets. None of the rules seemed to be working on Dis. Ihjel had admitted that, and Merv's death had proven it. Brion wondered who this Lige Mate was who appeared to have killed Merv. A forged cough broke through Brion's concentration, and he realized that Faussel had been standing in front of his desk for some minutes. Brion looked up and mopped perspiration from his face. "Your air conditioner seems to be out of order," Faussel said. "Should I have the mechanic look at it?" "There's nothing wrong with the machine. I'm just adapting to Dis's climate. What else do you want, Faussel?" The assistant had a doubting look that he didn't succeed in hiding. He also had trouble believing the literal truth. He placed the small stack of file folders on the desk. "These are the reports to date, everything we have uncovered about the Disans. It's not very much, but considering the antisocial attitudes on this lousy planet world, it's the best we could do." A sudden thought hit him and his eyes narrowed slyly. "It can't be helped, but some of the staff have been wondering out loud about that native that contacted us. How did you get him to help you? We've never gotten to first base with these people, and as soon as you land you have one working for you. You can't stop people from thinking about it, you being a newcomer and a stranger. After all, it looks a little odd." He broke off in mid-sentence as Brion looked at him in cold fury. "I can't stop people from thinking about it, but I can stop them from talking. Our job is to contact the Disans and stop this suicidal war. I have done more in one day than you all have done since you arrived. I have accomplished this because I am better at my work than the rest of you. That is all the information any of you are going to receive. You are dismissed." White with anger, Faussel turned on his heel and stamped out, to spread the word about what a slave driver the new director was. They would then all hate him passionately, which was just the way he wanted it. He couldn't risk exposure as the tyro he was. And perhaps a new emotion, other than disgust and defeat, might jar them into a little action. They certainly couldn't do any worse than they had been doing. It was a tremendous amount of responsibility. For the first time since setting foot on this barbaric planet, Brion had time to stop and think. He was taking an awful lot upon himself. He knew nothing about this world, nor about the powers involved in the conflict. Here he sat pretending to be in charge of an organization he had first heard about only a few weeks earlier. It was a frightening situation. Should he slide out from under? There was just one possible answer, and that was no. Until he found someone else who could do better, he seemed to be the one best suited for the job. And Ihjel's opinion had to count for something. Brion had felt the surety of the man's conviction that Brion was the only one who might possibly succeed in this difficult spot. Let it go at that. If he had any qualms it would be best to put them behind him. Aside from everything else, there was a primary bit of loyalty involved. Ihjel had been an Anvarian and a winner. Maybe it was a provincial attitude to hold in this big universe. Anvar was certainly far enough away from here. But honor is very important to a man who must stand alone. He had a debt to Ihjel, and he was going to pay it off. Once the decision had been made, he felt easier. There was an intercom on the desk in front of him, and he leaned with a heavy thumb on the button labeled Faussel. "Yes?" Even through the speaker the man's voice was cold with ill-concealed hatred. "Who is Lige Magte, and did the former director have returned from seeing him?" "Magte is a title that means, roughly, noble or lord. Lige Magte is the local overlord. He has an ugly stone heap of a building just outside the city. He seems to be the mouthpiece for a group of Magter that are pushing this idiotic war. As to your second question, I have to answer yes and no. We found Director Merv's head outside the door next morning, with all the skin gone. We knew who it was because the doctor identified the bridge work in his mouth. Do you understand?" All pretense of control had vanished, and Faussel almost shrieked the last words. They were all close to cracking up, if he was any example. Brion broke in quickly. "That will be all, Faussel. Just get word to the doctor I would like to see him as soon as I can." He broke the connection and opened the first of the folders. By the time the doctor called he had skimmed the reports and was reading the relevant ones in greater detail. Putting on his warm coat, he went through the outer office. The few workers still on duty turned their backs in frigid silence. Dr. Steen had a pink and shiny bald head that rose above a thick black beard. Brion liked him at once. Anyone with enough firmness of mind to keep a beard in this climate was a pleasant exception after what he had met so far. "How's the new patient, Doctor?" Steen combed his beard with stubby fingers before answering. "Diagnosis, heat syncope. Prognosis, complete recovery. Condition fair considering the dehydration and extensive sunburn. I've treated the burns and a saline drip is taking care of the other. She just missed going into heat shock. I have her under sedation now. I'd like to have her up and helping me tomorrow morning. Could she do this, with stimulants or drugs?" "She could, but I don't like it. There might be side factors, perhaps long-standing debilitation. It's a chance. A chance we will have to take. In less than 70 hours this planet is due for destruction. In attempting to avert that tragedy, I'm expendable, as is everyone else here. Agreed?" The doctor grunted deep in his beard and looked Brion's immense frame up and down. "Agreed," he said, almost happily. "It is a distinct pleasure to see something besides black defeat around here. I'll go along with you. Well, you can help me right now. I've checked the personnel roster and discovered that out of the 28 people working here, there isn't a physical scientist of any kind other than yourself. A scruffy bunch of button pushers and theoreticians, not worth a damn for field work, the whole bunch of them." The doctor toed the floor switch on a waste receptacle and spat into it with feeling. "Then I'm going to depend on you for some straight answers," Brion said. "This is an unstandard operation and the standard techniques just don't begin to make sense. Even Poisson distributions and Pareto extrapolations don't apply here." Steen nodded agreement and Brion relaxed a bit. He had just relieved himself of his entire knowledge of societics, and it had sounded authentic. "The more I look at it, the more I believe that this is a physical problem. Something to do with the exotic and massive adjustments the Disans have made to this hellish environment. Could this tie up in any way with their absolutely suicidal attitudes towards the cobalt bombs? Could it? Could it?" Dr. Steen paced the floor rapidly on his stocky legs, twining his fingers behind his back. "You're bloody well right it could. Someone is thinking at last and not just punching bloody numbers into a machine and sitting and scratching his behind while waiting for the screen to light up with the answers. Do you know how Disans exist?" Brion shook his head. "The fools here think it's disgusting, but I call it fascinating. They have found ways to join a symbiotic relationship with the life forms on this planet, even a parasitic relationship. You must realize that living organisms will do anything to survive. Castaways at sea will drink their own urine in need for water. Disgust at this is the only attitude of the overprotected who have never experienced extreme thirst or hunger. Well, here on Dis you have a planet of castaways." Steen opened the door of the pharmacy. "This talk of thirst makes me dry." With economical, efficient motions he poured grain alcohol into a beaker, thinned it with distilled water, and flavored it with some crystals from a bottle. He filled 2 glasses and handed Brion one. It didn't taste bad at all. "What do you mean by parasitic, Doctor? Aren't we all parasites of the lower life forms? Meat animals, vegetables and such?" No, you miss the point. I speak of parasitic in the exact meaning of the word. You must realize that to a biologist there is no real difference between parasitism, symbiosis, mutualism, biontergasy, commensalism. Stop, Brion said. "Those are just meaningless sounds to me. If that is what makes this planet tick, I'm beginning to see why the rest of the staff has that lost feeling. It is just a matter of degree of the same thing. Look, you have a kind of crustacean living in the lakes here. Very much like an ordinary crab. It has large claws in which it holds anemones, tentacle sea animals with no power of motion. The crustacean waves these around to gather food, and eats the